Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Costin here with my legendary lore tier list for Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Quite a few people have asked me to do this, so here it is. I'm sure quite a few people are going to be unhappy with some of the choices looking at used car brand, but let me just discuss this. What I'm going to rate legendary lore campaigns based on is things like what's the variety in those campaigns, be it unit recruitment, climate variety, those kind of things. How replayable are campaigns, how fun they are essentially, based on those kind of things. So, let's get started with the Beastmen. Starting with Tarax, I would say Tarax is either a decent or mediocre campaign. The reason I would say he's not quite as great is not necessarily because of any particular issue that he personally has, though he certainly has some issues, but more so the issues with the Beastmen in general. Beastmen do have quite a few limitations, and so with Tarax, you end up with a campaign that, yeah, it's fun once or twice or a couple of times, but then it loses any kind of replayability. So Tarax is fine, certainly a good lord, certainly good effects, but it's just those issues with the Beastmen in a campaign right now. I think they just didn't make the transition very well from Warhammer 2, where they were great when they were reworked, to Warhammer 3. Then we have all the other Beastmen campaigns, and they're just basically roughly on the same level. They're in a bad tier. Nowhere near as much replayability or variety or as much of a fun factor as Tarax, so yeah, they go one tier below that. They just feel very samey, and if you play one Beastmen campaign, you've kind of played them all. That is certainly something that does drag Tarax, who does have more unique mechanics than all the others. So the others, nowhere near as replayable. What I'm saying here basically is that you don't need to own all of the Beastmen. You can get Tarax with the Silence and the Fury DLC from Warhammer 2, play the Beastmen, have access to their entire roster. In fact, Silence and the Fury gives you more units and regiments renowned, so bear that in mind. Bretonnia, starting with Alberic. Yeah, I'm gonna say Alberic is a bad campaign. If we were to talk about just faction potential, faction effects, lord effects, he would certainly be higher level. But he's in Lustria, and Lustria, to be quite blunt about it, just plainly sucks. I do hope that at one point EA does change that, but right now, Lustria in itself is a drag on every single campaign, minus Skaven, but that's just purely because of Dundray. So every single legendary lord that is in Lustria suffers from that. Alberic's just not really that much of an interesting campaign, and because of the Lustria issue, as well as the fact that he needs to take Sartosa, he's just not really that compelling to play. You can certainly make it work. Bretonnia is actually a lot more powerful than people believe, like insane level of economy, growth, heroes of casualty replenishment, all that kind of stuff, but they do have their own issues. I think Alberic would be better if he had more naval mechanics, because that's kind of what his focus should be on, as opposed to being stuck in the freaking jungle. Then we have the Fey Enchantress. I would say the Fey Enchantress kind of goes in the same place. Now, some people say, oh, but she gets Grail Guardians from the start, and she gets Casualty Replenishment. Casualty Replenishment doesn't matter for Bretonnia. You have heroes with Casualty Replenishment, so what's the damn point? Then you have such an insane level of growth that even if you don't start with those mages, though Lewin Leoncoeur does start with one, it's not really going to hurt you. It might be a rougher early game in certain situations, but to be quite blunt about it, like, the Fey Enchantress just isn't really in a great position from my perspective. I would genuinely say she's kind of like the worst Bretonnia campaign to play. Like, yeah, she gets that Grail Guardian, she can have an easy game, early game against Grom, but then you end up with a very limited situation in her campaign, because you've got Ekeclaw that's going to attack you from the underway. You can't reply to that unless you go for Estalia. Not really a fun situation over there to deal with. Lewin Leoncoeur, same kind of problem. Though in his case, it's not Ekeclaw, it's Be'lakor, constantly being annoyed by that. And also on top of that, beyond that, Lewin Leoncoeur actually has the hardest time unlocking vows for his heroes, for his lords, because of his position. Because those vows do require you to go deal with a certain climate, or to do a siege battle in the desert or the jungle or something like that, or sea battle. So yeah, Lewin Leoncoeur is gonna struggle in that. It can be a good campaign in the long term, but honestly, like, I would even say Alberic and the Fey Enchantress can do better. Like, Lewin is certainly worth confederating. I wouldn't say he's necessarily worth playing his particular campaign. Can be better in the old world mod, though. And then we have Rapunzel, who's just a tier above. Let me explain why this is. Rapunzel starts with the ability of recruiting cavalry in her campaign, which, yeah, for Bretonnia, that's kind of a big deal. It's not necessarily the best cavalry, but at least she has that. She has a good, safe starting position. She has a situation in her campaign where she can unlock vows easier than other campaigns. And then she can go back to Bretonnia and confederate the other factions. So her campaign actually ends up working best, I would say, out of all of them. Can be a bit harsh dealing with the Nehekara Thunderdome, to be sure, but you have all the tools needed to succeed. And you're not really going to be bothered by anyone. You can defeat Archon early on, and then once you do so, it's like, who's going to bother you, Sartosa? Yeah, Sartosa is a joke that you're going to obliterate if it actually comes to that. Then we go into Chaos Dwarves. So for the Chaos Dwarves, I would say like Astrogoth and Zeytan are in a good tier, not a perfect tier. I think like Astrogoth just has issues in terms of his like faction effects, in the sense like controlled research rate and a bit of influence don't really matter that much. Like if you could gain more research rate throughout the campaign, that would be better, but Chaos Dwarf research is pretty fast, so it's not really a tangible benefit in his campaign. He's great to confederate. He can be good in a short campaign, but not so great in a long campaign. Zeytan, he can be much better in a long campaign because of his effects, but the problem is his starting situation is pretty rough. And yeah, that does affect replayability. If every time you start a campaign, you know it's going to be a bloody rough time, that you're probably not going to want to go into that campaign, especially because it's very important because he starts with the tier 1 capital, whereas Astrogoth and Drazov start with the tier 2 one. So I would say like Zeytan, especially because the way they handle terrain in his campaign is in a pretty rough situation. Can work very well, probably the best in terms of like long-term economic potential, or at least labor potential, but still. Then we have Drazov. The great things about Drazov, he has the best faction effects. He has a great Lord skill line. He's better in casting than Astrogoth, and because he's pretty good in melee, I would dare say he's even better than Astrogoth, because you can fly, you have a lot of power. You may not have necessarily the Lord durability Astrogoth has, but you have a lot more damage. So easily one of the best spellcasters in the game as a Lord. Great faction effects, great campaign situation, because you have a variety of foes to deal with, and because of the climate situation in Chaos Dwarves you can do whatever you want. Sure, you have your long objectives, short objectives, long objectives to deal with, but like Drazov is a campaign that you can play over and over and over again in numerous ways and really get it going. Besides, you start with a limited arsenal of nuclear weapons through the Black Fortress, so that's always fun. And then you have Tzeentch, Emmerich, Gremgor, Greases, Gors, Kugath to potentially deal with. Hellebron, geez, where would I rate Hellebron? This is an interesting question, really. I think Hellebron gets the mediocre tier. She's a lot stronger than a lot of people give her credit for. I would certainly argue that. But at the same time, it's just kind of the situation where with Hellebron, it's not really a fun campaign in a lot of ways. It's certainly not like an exciting campaign for a lot of people. If I were to do a poll on Dark Elf campaigns, she would probably come in last. Stronger than many people think she is. And people complain about the slave mechanic every single day. It's like, you're not going to struggle because of that. But yeah, certainly not as appealing as other campaigns. Lokir, certainly a good campaign, especially in the short term. Cathay is one of the best areas of the campaign map. Dark Elves are really good aggressive expansionists. Lokir really makes that early game of the Dark Elves work in a really, really good way. In fact, I would dare say he's close enough to perfect. But it's just like, he kind of falls off a bit in the long term, and his victory conditions, yeah, not that great. Malekith, yeah, he's decent. He's not horrible, but he's not particularly exciting either. What do you want me to say? Like, just not particularly great, not horrible. Malice Darkblade, this is going to piss off some people, but he's genuinely got a bad campaign. Great Lord, great amount of power, but really that campaign is awful. Like, honestly, like just an awful, boring campaign. Doesn't really have a lot on offer. Doesn't work all that well. I mean, Dark Elves are a very good race, don't get me wrong, but Malice Darkblade, probably the least exciting campaigns you can think of about. Like, Yes, I would rate him lower than Hellebrand, but at least Hellebrand, you know, gets to deal with things like Sigvald and Valkia. Malice Darkblade gets to deal with Epidemius and the Demon Prince, and it's like, what a joke, really. You can make it work. It does start with the Black Ark. There's potential there, but honestly, I think Hellebrand's campaign is better to play because at least you have some foes to fight that are going to put up a challenge. Alifanar, Valkia, Sigvald. You got nothing in Malice Darkblade. You don't even have that. I guess you can make it more interesting if you go for that dual star campaign, but pros and cons with that one. Morathi, perfect campaign. Great diplomatic potential, great starting position, one of the best starting provinces in the entire game. So much potential in her campaign. She is the best Dark Elf campaign by far. She's certainly the most unique Dark Elf in the game by far because of her Slaneesh corruption. She gets a lot of mages pretty early on. She's good with magic, she's good with the economy, she's good at diplomacy. The sheer potential that you can, the insane level of variety you can have in a Morathi campaign because of diplomacy, economic prowess is ridiculous. Want to invade Ulthuan early on? Go ahead for it. You want to make friends with Mazdamundi? Go ahead with it. Want to go for Illustria? Though I'm not sure why the hell you'd want to do that to yourself. You can do it. You want to spend your entire time in Nagaron just teaching the other Dark Elves who's the real one in charge? You can do so. Or maybe all of those at once. That's the great thing about Morathi. The sheer level of variety that you have in this campaign from the very start is ridiculous. So really a great campaign. And then Rakarth, trash tier campaign, like genuinely awful campaign to play. He suffers really from Lustria, and especially as Dark Elf Lord, he does suffer more for it than others. To explain that, Dark Elves are the kind of race that they want to constantly fight battles. The problem with Lustria is it's so slow to navigate, unless you have the Underway, that you are actually going to have a lot of downtime, which limits your potential, means you have less options, less variety, etc. And his faction effects just don't feel great. Belegar for the Dwarves. Great Legendary Lord to Confederate, undeniably so. Like, really, really powerful skill line, but his campaign is bad. Not quite trash, but playing a campaign where for a lot of the early game you're dealing with 50% upkeep is not a great mechanic, and I really think this campaign can be reworked. It's a lot of fun in the Old World mod, where you actually have the War of Karakay Peaks, but yeah, early on, not really so great, and it just limits the replayability, I would say, with like Belegar. I really think he certainly needs some improvements. If he got it, yeah, that would be great. Grombrindle. Really a perfect campaign. You can't complain about it. Like, he has more campaign movement range than all the other dwarves through his special blue skill line. Like, he gets plus 30% movement range for himself. So he gets 15 through his blue skill line, 15% through his personal skill line, so he's 30%. He can get to the movement range cap for himself, and then because you can get a lot of engineers, you can get it on every single one of your armies. Grombrindle is absolutely ridiculous, and he has a huge amount of variety because in every other dwarf campaign, you're kind of have the desire to confederate Grombrindle first as for the other legendary lords of the dwarves, because he generally gets wiped out by Malekith when he's played by the AI. But when you play him, you can decide. You can decide. Okay, I'm gonna go for Thorgrim, and I'm gonna go for Malachi, and I'm gonna go for Belegar. Thoric, sure, Thoric and Ungrim are also options, though I probably wouldn't pick them. Like, I would certainly get Thorgrim, Belegar, and Thoric. Belegar, Thorgrim, and Malachi much earlier than that in a campaign. So, a huge amount of potential. Then we have Malachi, and just by the way, to do this better, it's like, yeah, Malachi genuinely has the best campaign in the game by far. Huge amount of variety in terms of like climate, because of his starting position, huge amount of adventures, so many options, so many opponents, so many decisions. The only thing the game forces you is to get Grombrindle, or even then you can ignore Grombrindle if you want to, though I strongly recommend it. But like, yeah, just a really great campaign. Like, I think Malachi sets the standards of what a campaign should be going forward, from my perspective. Thoric, yeah, he's trash. Like, honestly, I'm sorry to say it, but right now he is absolutely trash. Better than Rakarth, to be sure. Dwarves are still a good race, but Having a campaign where you're dealing with the jungle is not great. Having climate limitations, which screws you over confederations with Malachi and Grumbrindle, not particularly great at all. Having a quest where you want to confederate Karak-Azul, but that is screwing you over because of the bug currently with confederations where if you confederate a minor dwarf faction, it increases the amount of grudges you need for major factions. Not great at all. None of those things are great. I mean, Forex is just, and having the worst situation with starting grudges, and yeah, just not really a great campaign. I think, like, he was one of the worst dwarf campaigns. Ungrim was the worst, but yeah, not great. Forgrim. Forgrim is a pretty decent campaign. Not certainly better than Malekith. Forgrim has great effects. Like, he gets growth. He gets more growth than all the other dwarves. He might start in a worse position than others, but he can really build the empire quite quickly because of the growth benefits he has. He basically starts, because of his special skill line, he starts with an Age of Reckoning army that's gonna be more powerful than all the others. He gets hero capacity, so more variety over there. He just has a couple of limitations. Like, I would say it's even possibly a good campaign, though. Yeah, I don't think it really matches up necessarily to some others. But still, really a good campaign, good amount of replayability. Ungrim, also in a decent tier. This is the thing with doing lore tier lists. Like, yeah, some campaigns are so similar. Or because races, you know, they're still part of the same race, you're going to see a lot of legendary lords on the same tier. But yeah, Ungrim, yeah, he's in a pretty decent spot. Not necessarily a good spot, though let me be clear on this. You can make a firm argument that, yeah, Forgrim and Ungrim can be in a good spot as well. I'd say, like, because of the Slayers, they've ended up, like, Ungrim starts with the ability of getting casualty replenishment hero. He starts with the ability of recruiting Slayers. He can get Garagrim as a legendary hero faster than anyone else. And he can make that army work. And his starting position in terms of grudges is vastly improved. He used to be genuinely one of the worst legendary lords in the game before the dwarf rework. But because of the dwarf rework, his changes to his skill line, the changes to Slayers, the addition of Demon Slayers and Dragon Slayers, you have the ability of making a Slayer Doomstack or Slayer Doomstacks work in his campaign a lot better. I would personally still prefer playing Forgrim in quite a few ways, but certainly Ungrim is in a much better situation than he was before. Gelt. One of the best campaigns in the game. I mean, I would say Malachi has the best campaign, but Gelt is a very, very close second in this respect. And you can even swap them around if you want to. Here's the thing about Gelt. You have a huge level of variety because of the magic. Like, in most campaigns with magic, what you do is you focus on one or two lores of magic that are stronger than anything else because you have limitations on hero capacity. Well, Gelt, you don't care about that. You go with all of the schools of magic, or maybe you get all of them but one or two, but everything else has value. They put a lot of effort in that, the special effects in that, and it's not just like, oh, you have a lot of mages and a lot of cataclysm spells and all that. No. It's more than that. You have the objectives in Cathay. You have the choice in Cathay. Do you conquer Cathay? Do you ally Cathay? Do you stay in Cathay? Do you go back to the Empire? Do you try and do both? Because you can do both in a campaign if you go for Gorst. Such an incredible campaign, really, from the start. CA really knocked this one out of the park, I would dare say. Elspeth, good campaign. Like, genuinely a good campaign, just not in a perfect tier from my perspective. She has easily the best army of the Empire, but she doesn't have the insane level of potential of Gelt. From a magic standpoint, but it certainly works. But it's more of a straightforward campaign. I'd say, like, Elspeth is certainly far less replayable than some other campaigns, and yes, that does count for me quite a bit. I think, like, campaign variety as opposed to just pure unit variety is something that counts for quite a bit. And it's not like Gelt and Malachi don't have unit variety, but yeah, like, Elspeth is a really good campaign, don't get me wrong on that, just not really perfect. And same with, like, Karl Franz. Like, I would say, like, it depends on your personal preference. If you're more focused on a campaign situation like I am, I would say Karl Franz is better than Elspeth, but Elspeth does have a better army. So, yeah, pretty much the same. Like, Karl Franz really does feel like the Emperor of the Empire right now, diplomat, etc. Lots of possibilities in terms of growth. He's really the empire builder of the Empire. Makes sense, makes perfect sense. Good amount of campaign choices, so many powerful abilities with copy-pasting matters of state. from Yanbo. Really good campaign compared to the trash tier that it was. Like, he's still not as good as Gelt, and that was the case before patch, but he's moved from being one of the most miserable campaigns in the game to being one of the best campaigns. I would still not rate him perfect here, but like I think perfect needs to be something quite a bit more special. Marcus Wolfhard, yeah, he's trash. Easily one of the worst campaigns, like horrible campaign mechanics, severe limitations, and honestly, it's not even worth buying his DLC. Like with Thrones of Decay, buy that. Like you don't need archers or war wagons or anything like that. Huntsman, maybe, but like everything that his DLC offered, Thrones of Decay does better. Like Master Engineers are better than Huntsman Generals. The gunpowder units right now, because of range changes, work better than archers anyway. You can still use archers to make it work, but like, yeah, you do get unit variety in the campaign, but it's like there's so many limitations, and it just feels so lackluster. And he deals with Lustra, so not great. Same with Volkmar, although I would certainly say Volkmar is in a bit of a better state than Marcus Wolfhard, but like the Books on the Gash system is just horrible to deal with right now. Not a great situation to play a campaign as Volkmar at the moment in a lot of ways. And certainly not worth it from my perspective right now. Like Marcus Wolfhard and Volkmar, just absolutely not worth it. Miao Ying, she's mediocre. She's not quite bad. You can certainly enjoy playing this campaign, but just, yeah, not particularly exciting, really. The least interesting Cathay campaign, you know what, maybe I would even put her in bad tier, because I think the other campaigns do deserve that spot. Like, she's just the generic Lord of Cathay, and it's like, honestly, the least interesting campaign to play as Cathay by far, and Cathay does certainly have an issue. Yambo, decent campaign. He does suffer from Lustra. His campaign does get boring pretty quickly, so he's certainly not getting good here. In terms of strength, yeah, he's very high up there, but in terms of like replayability and fun factor and variety, yeah, he's just decent. He does have those matters of state mechanic, which do help spice things up. And then Xiao Ming, yeah, just a mediocre campaign. Pretty good early on, pretty good for like the first 10, 20 turns, but then yeah, just like the problem with Cathay, it's like you win over Cathay and then there's nothing else to this campaign, especially because of the climate limitation, so it does work. Azag, interesting one to consider. I would say like, I would say Azag is in a good tier. The reason I would say Azag is in a good tier, he can conquer the entirety of the Empire, the entirety of the mountains, and the entirety of the Darklands, or Wasteland in general. That gives him a huge amount of action potential in his campaign, because you can either go west even, or east. Your objectives will push you to go west, but you can make that work. It's no problem for the short campaign victory condition. It's not really too big of a deal if you ignore that as a greenskin. You can also let Grimgor do his thing and conquer the entire mountains in war, and then just go there, beat his army, and take all of that territory for yourself. Huge amount of potential over there. Does start a bit slower than Grimgor, to be sure, but still, like, really interesting campaign. Grimgor, yeah, S tier by far. Like, certainly more interesting in a lot of ways than Morathi and Drazov. Like, when I think of a Greenskin campaign, Grimgor embodies that campaign. Just a brute force approach. The ability of taking a tier 4 or tier 5 city very early on in a campaign, farming Tamarkan for his defeat trait, destroying Kolek, conquering a huge chunk of the campaign map unopposed because no one can stop you. No one can even come close to stopping you. Like, Azak actually has some issues. Grimgor, let me just put it like this. In every campaign where we fight Grimgor, he is utterly freaking terrifying. So you're playing an endgame crisis with this bastard. Then we have Grom. Grom is decent. I wouldn't say he's mediocre, but like he just suffers from the climate situation. Like, it's fun to conquer Ulthuan, but then you just end up with far less replayability than you might want, because it's like you realize you're very far away from the other greenskins, so you don't have the variety of confederations. And while the Cauldron is certainly very powerful, just again, climate limitations, you take all of Ulthuan, great. What else are you going to take? Because every other climate that surrounds you is not particularly great for you. Can be fun, but yeah. Skarsnik, trash tier. Like, easily the most forgettable campaign. He's so bad that he's actually not even worth fucking confederating. Like, seriously, confederating Skarsnik is actually a downside in a campaign. Now, I'm not joking. Let me explain why this is. In Warhammer 3, the key to success to a campaign is building up not just one very powerful army, but multiple powerful armies. The problem with Skarsnik is he actually goes against that. Like, he has a skill that basically screws you over with your other armies, so not really worth it. Like, a generic lord is better than him at leading an army. Now, and no joke, because Goblin Tide skill exists. If he had Goblin Tide, he'd be better, he'd be worth using, but he doesn't have Goblin Tide. And a Goblin Shaman has Goblin Tide. A Goblin Shaman here, a Lord has that. So it's like, yeah, just not worth it. Limitations on recruitment, again, not great. Just like, yeah, not a great campaign. Warzag, I don't know, like, I feel like Warzag would be a lot more interesting if you could get Savage Orc benefits on a faction level as just opposed to army level. He's not horrible, but I'll be honest, he's certainly less interesting than Grom and Azak and Grimgor. So yeah, he just gets the mediocre tier. Not horrible, does have replayability. To be sure, Greenskins are just a great race in general, but still. Alariel. I would dare say Alariel is in a decent tier. Probably better than Malekith, Yunbo, and Grom. And I would certainly say Grom is better than Malekith than those others. Just rearranging certain things over here. Yeah, just trying to sort it out, to sort this out a bit. Like, yeah, for instance, Meowing is certainly better than the others. So over here with Alariel, my perspective on Alariel, she's a great empire builder in her campaign. She does have a good amount of replayability because of the things you can do over there. But High Elves just have a couple of issues. And so it's a great campaign in the long term, lots of potential in the long term to be short, but just like limitations early game that you do have. She's more focused on empire building than having a really interesting army to actually use. Alifanar, really good campaign. While High Elves have some issues, like his campaign starting position really adds a huge level of variety in his campaign. Really fun, great faction effects, huge amount of power. You're basically playing a Skaven Legendary Lord for the High Elves. That's how people have described him, and I think it still stands firm. Like, Alifanar is really fun, just the sheer number of opponents. Even though you have limitations of climate, it's like you have a lot on your plate, and by the time you actually overcome that, you're going to be in such a great position that it won't really matter as much. Whereas in some other campaigns, it matters because you deal with one or two initial opponents. You don't have just one or two opponents. I mean, you got Malekith, Hellebrand, Valkia, Sigvald, Be'lakor, Marathi. Yeah, that's something that's not going to get boring easily, suffice to say. Elfarian, this is where some people are going to disagree with me, but I think Elfarian is just a mediocre campaign. I think dual star campaigns don't work quite as well, and because it's putting pressure on you to do two things. The thing I dislike about Elfarian is, like, you have to fight a lot of freaking battles manually to capture them for the sake of his prison, which is not really a great system. I mean, certainly it can be a fun campaign. You do have unique units, the most unique units in any High Elven campaign. But I just think the systems of the campaign don't work quite as well. Good Lord, don't get me wrong, good Lord, good effects, good units, just the interactions on the campaign map do drag him down a bit. Like, I would rather play an Alariel campaign on a Alifanar campaign. Emmerich, pretty solid, roughly around the same spot as Elfarian. Good campaign, Darklands is a great campaign area, lots of variety, lots of opponents to deal with. But, like, I think for High Elves right now, Wolf 1 is such an important part that not starting there does screw you over. You can get Calidor, but the system is gimmicky as hell, and it's annoying to interact with. So, yeah, not the great system there. And I think it does get boring after a while, so not quite the same level of replayability, but still certainly a fun campaign to play at least once. Teclis, trash tier. Like, genuinely the worst High Elven campaign, the least interesting High Elven campaign since day one. He's not been worth playing, I would say, like, ever since he's come out. I've tried playing this campaign many times, trying to get myself to enjoy it, and it's never been an enjoyable campaign. Gelt has a great mage-focused campaign. Like, actually, Gelt in a lot of ways is what Teclis should be. I'm not even joking or exaggerating. Tyrion, yeah, he's pretty decent. Like, just the generic Lord of the High Elves, really strong in combat, really straightforward campaign, pretty decent campaign, works fairly well. Like, sometimes just being simple just works out. I wouldn't rate it necessarily higher, but really good starting campaign for new players, really good Lord, straightforward campaign, good effects, good Lord effects, good faction effects, so yeah, it just ends up working quite well. Scarbrand is trash. No. Okay. Let me be serious. I think Scarbrand's campaign is a bad campaign. Like, to be quite blunt about it. Why do I think it's a bad campaign? It has very little variety in terms of unit recruitment. You will be basically playing around with one army, and it's going to be filled with tier 1, tier 2 units, and that's it. Very limited hero recruitment, very limited army variety, very limited campaign options. You always want to do the same freaking thing as Scarbrand. Spend a couple of turns fighting in the Battlelands, wrecking everything in sight, then teleport to Ulthuan, or to Nagrand, or Northern Cast Wastes. Teleport there, make your way, beat up Nakari, and that's it. Powerful lord, undeniably so. Very powerful lord in a lot of ways, but just like a one-off campaign. Good to play once, sure, but that's about it. Not going to say more. Boris Ursus for Kislev. Well, I think in the short term, Boris Ursus has a great campaign. Like, really good starting army, really good faction potential. He doesn't have the same freaking annoyances as Kislev, so I think he's a pretty good campaign for what it is. He's held back by the fact that he's still a Kislev lord, and you can argue, oh, the climate screws him over. You don't have to spend your entire freaking campaign in the Northern Cast Wastes, let me just put it like that. I think, like, this is the thing, a lot of people just view Boris Ursus as someone who's going to spend his entire time in the North. Why the hell would you do that? Like, yeah, you are incentivized to stay there initially to deal with freaking Archeon, but once there, just go everywhere else. And here's the thing with Boris Ursus compared to Katrin and Kastaltin. You got Mountain, you got Wasteland, you got Frozen. You get that Wasteland means you got the entirety over the freaking Darklands. You want to go play a Boris Ursus campaign where you go beat up Grimgor? You can do so. You want to have the massive showdown? You want to conquer Zarnagrund? You can do so. It won't screw you over. This is why this campaign is so much better in Katrin and Kastaltin. You don't have the same limitations. You have a very simple, easy, short campaign victory conditions. You can get more heroes than either Kastaltin or Katrin. Yes, that does matter. You gain benefits from devotion, so the economic benefit of Dash, for instance, but you're not dealing with devotion and invocations. You get more devotion anyway than others because you're constantly fighting chaos. So just like, yeah, the best Kislev campaign by far. Kastaltin and Katrin, yeah, just trash campaigns, like victory conditions. I'll talk about the Stank in just a second. But yeah, Kastaltin and Katrin, just trash campaigns, both of them. It's not so much that their effects are bad. It's just more so like the limitations of supporters, the limitations of devotion, the limitations of invocation, the horrible supporter system. Yeah, just both trash campaigns not worth playing. Astankia, also a trash campaign. Like, in Astankia's case, it's not that she has supporters or invocations, no, but her system is just so freaking annoying, man, really. Like, such a horrible, bloody system. Such an uninteresting campaign. Oh, it's like, oh, start every turn. Click a couple of buttons to get individual army buffs, and you're not even doing it because you need the army buffs. You're just doing it for the sake of the freaking objective to unlock more campaign abilities. Like, what the hell was he thinking about? Like, they were copying Grom's Cauldron, that's clear, but Grom's Cauldron is fun to interact with. Astankia's freaking hexes and curses and blessings are just horrible as a system. And it, like, having a Kislev campaign with limitations unless you actually own territory or are allied with Kislev is also not a great situation. So yeah, really crap tier campaign. Demon Prince, do you want me to put him anywhere? How about this? We ignored his existence. Okay, he's trash tier. He's genuinely one of the worst. Alright. I would certainly rate Astankia, Katrin, and Kastaltin better than this garbage that follows them, but still. Gorak. Oof. This is where things get a bit spicy, don't they? Don't they? So, Gorak. He's decent. He's mediocre for what he is. I would really like to deduct more points, but like, he's powerful. He starts with a nuclear weapon. He just gets screwed over by the Lizardmen stuff. Krokar, yeah, decent. Work with Saras. Not quite as bad. Not quite as good as Gorak, but still roughly same tier. Masamune, trash tier, like the generic lord of the Lizardmen, who's supposed to be this apocalypse level force in the freaking universe, is like pathetic. What is up with CA and mages? Not quite as bad as Daniel, but damn, does he give Daniel a run for his money. Nakai, same thing. Like, yeah, many of the Lizardmen campaigns are going to be the same tier. Actually, I would say Nakai is just a bad campaign. Like, you do have some variety of heroes. You do have power. You can make it work. Cathay is still a gray area, but, like, just... It's been an awful campaign since day one, and CA never fixed it. Better than Marcus Wolfhard, I suppose, but, yeah. Oxyatl... S-tier campaign, as much of an S-tier campaign as you can get. Like, huge level of variety in a campaign because of the teleportation. You get more units, more unique units than all the other Lizardman campaign because you get a lot of those blessed units for the missions he gets. You can teleport around the map. You have every climate suitable. You don't have to spend an entire campaign dealing with the freaking jungle. Imagine that. Imagine that Lizardmen can actually be more fun if they don't have to spend their freaking life in the freaking jungle. Screw the jungle. Screw Lustra. Screw the Southlands. Tenuan, he's mediocre. I mean, he's good. He's certainly strong, but it's just like Lustria. Again, just jungle. Screw the jungle. Just, yeah, he's better than Gorak and Krokar, but still, that's not really a price. Tic-tac-toe, yeah, trash campaign. Certainly nowhere near as bad as these others, but, like, he's not really exciting. He just feels like he's better as a generic lord than Mazdamundi. He does at least have some uniqueness with the flying units, but you don't really care about that. The Star Wars Doomtide is still a thing. Norsca, yeah, trash tier. Like, I don't need to say anything more on the subject of Norsca, do I? It's the race that a lot of people want to see rework. Bad campaign mechanics, has not aged well, limited roster, limited potential, limited economy, limited hero capacity, only one lore choice, just horrible systems, and buggy systems at that. Epidemius, yeah, I'd say Epidemius is trash. It's certainly nowhere near as bad as the others, but just feels like a generic lore. Like, his faction effects don't even work very well because getting that many plagues in a campaign map is not really going to be as doable. And would you rather invest that effort in having a good economy and good units, or would you rather invest that effort in just getting plagues for a faction effect that doesn't really count for all that much? I know which one I'm going for. Kugath, mediocre campaign, like, not a horrible one. Certainly Nurgle has been improved. Fix the mountain climate creative assembly, that's all I'm going to say. Tamarkan, he's decent. I wouldn't say he's good or perfect. I certainly wouldn't rank him on the same level as these ones, but he's in a good, he's in a decent state. Certainly better than the others. It's just like, again, climate limitations, some issues in Nurgle, but like really fun campaign, really fun mechanics. It's the race that drags him down, I would say, more so than any Lord effect. Can work really fun. Needs victory condition improvements, like allow us to vassalize Grumgor to be able to win, for instance. And I would rate this campaign a bit higher. Fix the mountain climate situation. Like, it's such a troll move putting a campaign in an unpleasant climate around you. It's something that affects Grom as well. Greases, yeah, trash tier. Like, I'm actually, like, gonna rate the Ogres, like, even worse than Daniel. I know that sounds like a troll move to some people, but let me be as blunt as possible. For all the issues Daniel has, for all the issues Daniel has, we can at least accept the fact that he's never going to get any improvement. But yeah, let's be serious. Like, Daniel is the worst one, but yeah, Ogres are not that better. Tzeentch, perfect campaign for a Skaven, like, really good campaign. Cathay, great area, lots of faction potential, good starting situation, good climate control, good effects. Just really a great campaign. Ikeclaw, oh, this is going to hurt more than Scarbrand, but I'm going to have to say it. I think Ikeclaw is just a decent campaign. He's not a good campaign because his start sucks. Like, let me put it like this. Skaven Blight's, the climate around, not the climate, the territory around Skaven Blight has sucked. Like, it's a much better campaign if he has better starting situation. Like, Old World has shown that's how much fun it can be. But, geez, like, the climate over the terrain situation, like, really makes me hate replaying Ikeclaw. But obviously nuclear weapons are really fun. Scroll, kind of mediocre, like, not bad. Can be a lot more fun than people give him credit for. Certainly would rate him higher than a lot of these campaigns. Actually, I would probably rate him the best of the mediocre ones, but still just not particularly exciting. Queek, pretty good campaign, pretty decent campaign. I'm actually going to put him higher than Ikeclaw. Oh, the rage, gentlemen. But let me be blunt in this. Having a good campaign starting position, having good effects, Like, you can have nuclear weapons but suffer in your campaign just because the terrain you have around it. Queek has good terrain around him. He has a good campaign from that particular perspective. Fraught, same situation as Claw, like suffers because of terrain, not quite as much, but still, like really good campaign for long term, but if you overcome that early game situation, though it does affect replayability from my perspective. Tzeentch, he's an S tier, Legendary Lord, the greatest. No, Tzeentch is freaking trash tier. It's not as horrible, I'm exaggerating a bit, like he's the top of the trash tier, but come on, he's Tzeentch. Like, Storm Vermin are not worth recruiting in a Skaven campaign. There's so many good army possibilities for Skaven, and you're gonna go with Tzeentch. Like, seriously, play Skrull, play Ikaclaw, play anything else in a game except Tzeentch. He's really not worth it. Nakari. Yeah, also bad campaign. Better than Scarbrand, to be sure. Hell, I would even say that it's, like, better than a lot of these campaigns. But just like, it has this situation. It's really fun to play Nakari early on because you have to deal with the Doomtide of Wolf one. But once you do that, it just becomes a cakewalk. So it's like not really replayable, but it's fun to at least do once. Archon the Black. Oh boy, we get into Tomb King territory. I would say he's decent. Now, my perspective on the Tomb Kings is they certainly need an update to work better within the context of Warhammer 3. And yes, there is a new tier that has come up. I think it was getting to the point that it was unfair to some of the trash campaigns to put them all in the same position compared to what is going to come here. But still, Archon is decent. He starts with that extra army. He has a good starting position. He has more campaign variety because of those units and extra army that he does have. By the way, speaking about Ikaclaw and Fraught, they're certainly better than the others over here. It's just like, they're good lords. Good race, great lords. It's just they get screwed over by their starting positions. Like, literally, a bad starting position, which both of them have, can really screw over a campaign. That's my perspective on that. That's why I think Queek and Snitch rank higher. No, I know people are going to disagree with that, especially Ikaclaw. Seriously, though. As for other things, let's put everyone where they deserve to be. So yeah, Daniel at the bottom. I would say probably Trog is better than Wulfric. Just Mazdamundi, yeah, he's actually worse than Norsca, so is Teclis. Like, Teclis is better than that, and Skarsnik, yeah, like, how do you make a crap Legendary Lord for a good race? Well, maybe CA can answer that particular question at one point. And also, yeah, Marcus Wolfhard. Volkmar just avoids it, I would dare say, just. And I can't stress that enough. Katep, yeah, trash campaign. Like, beyond trash campaign, like, very few redeemable things to deal with that. Khalida, better, but still, like, really screwed over by the limitations of the Tomb Kings, etc. He's better than Khalida, but still a really bad campaign in a lot of ways. Changeling, good and powerful lord, horrible campaign in a lot of ways. I guess I'd rank him higher than Marcus Wolfhard, but damn. Kairos, yeah, just awful freaking campaign in a lot of ways, but roughly there with the Changeling for different reasons. Vampire Coast. You know what, I'm just realizing I'm gonna fill up the entire Beyond Trash tier here because, yeah, the entire Vampire Coast is in Beyond Trash, like literally one of the worst races in the game right now. I'd say Aranessa is just a bit higher, just a bit, barely, like barely at the minimal point, but yeah, the others just Beyond Trash. Vampire Coast, absolutely not worth playing. Do need an update as a race. We don't know if we're going to have them. The problem with the Vampire Coast is, one, the multiplayer community complained, oh, we can't have vampires with good leadership so they don't get screwed. Well, that's what we got. So it's not even CA's fault, not purely. But on top of that, the mechanics that the Vampire Coast have are old. And other races, other Legendary Lords, have taken those mechanics and improved on them substantially, like the Skaven Undercity, for instance, Axiatal's Sanctums, all that. So yeah, not a great situation over there. Vampire counts. Kemmler, yeah, he's actually in a decent enough space, and because of his starting position, he has a good amount of campaign variety. Not necessarily as exciting as some others. Gorst, yeah, he's a trash campaign. Not beyond trash. He does have some redeemable factors. He is powerful, but he's also dull as dirt to play. I guess like Gorst would deserve the strong but boring tier. The only lord outside of 2 races that's gonna get that particular tier. Because he is strong, he's just dull as dirt. As for the other Vampire Counts Legendary Lords, yeah, Isabella and Vlad are good Legendary Lords. Really fun campaign, good amount of variety, huge amount of power, campaign mechanics that work. Don't get me wrong, Vampire Counts could really use a rework to make themselves more interesting to play, but they're one of the few races CA has done since Warhammer 1 without a racial rework like the Greenskins that just works very well. And Manfred is, yeah, he's beyond trash. No, okay, he's just a trash campaign, probably the best trash campaign, just not really interesting, not exciting. It can work in long term because of the books and the gash, but yeah, the least exciting Vampire Counts campaign and one of the least exciting campaigns in general. And as for everything else in terms of Warriors of Chaos and Wood Elves, they all get into the strong but boring tier without exception. They can be fun to a limited extent, but they just so trivialize campaign mechanics that I can't really rate them higher than that. Like, they're strong, they're dull as dirt as well. I'd say Sisters of Twilight probably good, Archaon and Belagor probably good, Valkia, like I would say Valkia is more interesting to play than Archaon, though certainly Archaon works better. And this would be the way I handle it over here. In quite a few ways. Like, yeah, Durf was more interesting to play than Sigvald, but yeah, like Wood Elves and Warriors of Chaos just trivialize the game mechanics and make the entire campaign a joke in a lot of ways. And it is a shame because both races did get great reworks, but it's just how things are right now. So that is my tier list. I know people are going to disagree on quite a lot of things, especially this big boy over here, but that's where I stand. That's my perspective. So the campaigns in S tier and A tier really worth playing at least once, multiple times even. B, you know what? Just because someone isn't mediocre doesn't mean they're horrible to play. They're still pretty decent to play. Anything beyond that, yeah, just not really worth playing. Maybe once or twice, but that's about it. Like, that's certainly what I would say with Meowing, Nakari, and Skarbrand. I'll give Skarbrand this much. He can be better to play than the entire Beastmen roster. In fact, I would dare say like the entire Beastmen roster of campaigns is there. So that is my tier list. I know. Let the disagreements begin. Let the Thunderdome in the comment section begin. And look, let me be very clear on this. I am not trolling here. I'm not making something I'm not just putting this for the sake of trolling or anything like that. This is where I actually stand for many reasons with respect to how the game is, with like 2,600 hours playing it and roughly 10,000 hours in Total War easily in total. So yeah, the campaigns over here are really good, really knocked it out of the park in multiple ways. I think like they need to improve Oxyal's campaign performance because like the map FPS really goes down when you're playing his campaign. So there's a reason to drop Oxyatl, maybe a tier for that, but yeah, performance issues, that's its own, you know, kettle of fish, let's say. Anyway, Costin signing out, stay tuned for more.